this episode of the Weird Obscure World podcast.
I have been abducted.
Wait, what?
Their main forms they take are reptilian entities.
Okay, please follow us.
Oh, yeah, we should start with that.
Share,
review, subscribe. You can find us anywhere that you get your podcast.
Your social medias.
Yeah.
If we are not showing up on one of your podcast catchers, let us know. We want to find them. And
yeah, because I think we kind of fall into these patterns. Like, I always use the same podcast catcher, and I think other people do the same. So if you don't see us, let us know. But go to the webpage. It's on Facebook. Click the Learn More button. Takes you right to the webpage. Subscribe. It gets you the extra content. It gets you updates when there's new shows, so on and so forth.
if there's something you want to hear, let us know. We want to research it. We like finding out new crazy stuff and sharing it with everyone.
Yeah, you can email us right directly from there or at weirdobscureworld@gmail.com.
Or Facebook, or Twitter.
We're totally connected.
Well, Betsy is.
Ish.
I'll be honest, I'm not on any of those.
So, another week?
Yes.
Another week.
Yes, we've got some news stories, and I believe it's your week to start.
My week to start. So, we've covered poo jogging before. The mad pooper from Colorado Springs.
Yes, that individual who drinks coffee before their morning.
Listen, I don't think it's the coffee. I think it's the jogging. Because, and perhaps I only got this story because our social media apps are now currently tracking our every move. But this came across. Headline reads, "Man quits his job after being outed as Australia's notorious poo jogger."
Why did he quit his job?
Well, because they got a picture.
He's a landscaper.
Worse. So much worse. Okay, so here's how it goes. He's accused of he's a serial pooper. And not pooping cereal, but like pooping notoriously in public, has quit his job after, you've got to see this picture. We'll put it on our website in the subscribers area. It's good stuff. A photographer caught him relieving himself on a suburban Brisbane street.
On the street?
The picture tells all of the story. This poor guy is like squatting down, full on, toilet paper in hand. So
he jogs with toilet paper because he knows it's going to happen.
So here's the thing. The mad pooper from Colorado, she didn't lie. Nasty mad pooper. Well, this guy at least has manners.
Yeah. The crazy one about the Colorado is that it happened multiple times. And in all those times, she never thought. She had a fanny pack on. She never thought. I'm going to throw
the pooper scooper bags.
maybe 5 squares of toilet paper in there. She's just like, I'm gonna growler, gravy, and run. And just she has to go through. Well, first of all, I'm sure she buys brown underwear. Just go right to the chase. You can't wash those nice little pink numbers away from the brown, especially after you've ran in it.
Oh,
you've got that
worked it into the
gravy,
fabric,
and it's foaming, and it's got a life of its own. You know.
Yeah. So, man's name, Andrew Douglas McIntosh, dubbed the Poo Jogger. He's pictured as defecating in public, holding toilet paper.
I like how he's looking at the guy at the camera. He's like, huh? Like when you let your dog out into the front yard.
And the dog looks at you.
Makes eye contact. You know, don't look away. Don't look away. I need your emotional support.
Yeah, he's been charged with 1 count of public nuisance. He's 64 years old.
So he's an old man doing it.
Mm-hmm. And here's the allegations. He has fouled on the private footpath of an apartment block near his Green Slopes, Brisbane home 30 times over the last year.
30 times over the last year. So once every 2 weeks.
Give or take. Sometimes twice. Once every week.
He dives off the jogging trail.
Yeah.
Leans up against the building. Snaps one off.
Wipes, apparently.
You know, makes you wonder if afterwards, like, he rubs his cleats into the grass like a dog would. You know, throws a little grass in the air.
Kicks some dirt on it.
And then back on his jog.
So, according to local reports, the regularity of McIntosh's movements proved to be his undoing.
So they could time it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it's Monday, I'm going to go wait. It's right over here.
He's about to take a dump. Yeah. So, with his reputation seemingly in the toilet, total pun intended, McIntosh has since stepped down from his job as the quality care manager at Aveo, a company that runs retirement villages.
Uh-huh.
So
he's a quality care manager. Mm-hmm. The sad thing is he's probably good at that job, too.
Yeah. So, additionally, McIntosh is also on Brisbane City Council, which advises issues associated with development and planning. You know what? How about you plan
That's an elected position as well.
Okay, so if you're in the planning and you know you got to take a crap at the same footpath every day, plan for a porta potty.
For a porta potty.
Yeah.
For a honey bucket.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so they could time it, and they knew where it was going to be.
Always
so this guy knew. So he knew where he was going to snap one off. Mm-hmm. So instead of adjusting your route, so your route ran you by, say, a Starbucks, which says use their restroom now.
Right. Or a construction site that has a porta potty.
Yeah,
or
but those move.
A park that has an outdoor facility.
Or into the woods.
You know what? Okay, so jogging apparently has its downfalls. One of them being...
You have to jog.
You have to take a crap, apparently, halfway through your jog. People.
Hey, he took toilet paper.
That's true. But he could have taken one of those little plastic bags they give out at dog parks, and he could have picked up his stuff, put it in his pocket, finished his jog, took it home.
As a human being, held the bag right underneath.
Oh, yeah. Caught it.
Gone for business.
Yeah. Listen, joggers.
Could you imagine running with the...
Take it with you when you go.
Bag of shit in your hand. Sloshing around. It's still warm.
Jogging has hazards we didn't know about.
Afternoon, night, not time classes just to make sure that it all stays in the bag.
Lord have mercy. Yeah. Joggers. Damn it, joggers. Stop it. Do your business before you know this is going to happen. Do it before you leave the house. Or, like you said, adjust your jogging route to accommodate your need to defecate.
I'm wondering if there's more to that story. Like, he knew someone that lived right above that, his location that he chose to do his business. And he knew that in the mornings they like to open the window to air the house out, and they had wronged him in the past.
And so the fragrance would
waft
its way in.
Maybe it's a planned thing. Like, he's like, all right, well, it's Monday, you know. George is going to get his little moment of me now.
Yeah.
Because
perhaps.
To have it timed. But that lady, hers seemed to be in the same location quite often because they had it multiple times on the same security camera.
Yes, same with him. Same security camera. Yeah, maybe he's just defecating everywhere and this is the only place they caught him. Maybe every block he has to take a crap. I don't know.
It's
I don't know, but I'm telling you.
super incontinent all the time.
I saw a jogger on the way here to record this today. Totally look at him differently now.
Did you slow down?
Well,
Follow him
he
to
just
see
looked-
what kind of
He just
umbrage he gives to people's lawns?
He just looked really uncomfortable. You know how runners always just look like they're in so much discomfort?
Oh, yeah. Most of the time.
Like, for real, I'm thinking the whole time, he's probably got to take a crap. Probably holding it in. Squeezing the old cheeks, trying to keep it in right
You
now.
look at how their toes are pointing. If they're clenching real hard in the back, their toes are pointed out. But if they're loose and
They
they
run all pigeon-legged.
they have their morning constitution, they're straightforward.
Oh.
So if you see someone that looks like their jogging is akin to a chicken running,
Yes.
you know there's an issue.
You know, something's about to go
And
down.
if their toes are pointed in, they've got to pee. So, I mean, scientific studies abound, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, damn it, joggers.
My story has to do with toilet paper as well.
Well.
We've got the common argument that's gone on.
Stop
Well,
it.
for years and years. For years and years. The argument is over toilet paper. How do you hang it?
You've got to be
In
kidding me.
or out, right? There's an argument. Do you
Yes.
hang
How
it
was it designed?
in or the devil's way or out or the angelic way? That's my personal
You hang it out?
personal names. I hang it out. Yeah. Why would you hang it in? You got to reach underneath it, and it's just wrong when you spin it and you can't see the outcome. You got to hang it out. Okay. So over or under, toilet roll debate finally settled thanks to a 128-year-old manual.
What?
Yeah.
What if they had it wrong then?
This comes from the Mirror. They never had nothing wrong 128 years ago.
That's
We know
probably
this.
true. Okay.
Apparently, there are two types of people in the world. Devils and angels. I'm an angel. Betsy's talking like she might be a devil.
I don't even pay attention. I don't know.
You don't pay attention.
No, when I hang it on, I just hang it.
When I hang toilet paper rolls, there's some pre-planning. Got to have it just right.
No.
Check to make sure there's not a wrinkle in the cardboard tube because you don't want that getting in the way of a good pull. I mean,
No.
when you're going to break one off, you want to have a serenity.
Listen,
You don't want to argue with toilet paper when you're breaking one off.
I don't even think
You
about
end
it.
up getting...
I would say...
You end up getting... Just like you don't use that... Never use that RV toilet paper in your house. Because you'll end up getting in touch with yourself.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You don't want a finger to break through at that emergency moment. And you don't want to have to wrestle with the toilet paper on the roll when you're in serenity. You want to take yourself to a happy place, maybe turn on some Enya,
Poor Enya.
get that squatty
no
potty
idea.
to where it's got your knees elevated up to, between your nips and your belly button, so you got that good angle, and, read Facebook.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they had a poll. And of course, out won. But they went to an old manual, a 128-year-old manual. The Mail Online found this. I'm reading this off the Mirror UK. And it shows a picture of wrapping the toilet paper roll, is what the picture says. And the toilet paper is placed out. Now, apparently, that long ago, toilet paper was new enough that you had to have diagrams on how to pull it out and how to tear it. It even shows how to tear it. The argument's over.
It's ended.
Toilet paper,
All things
out.
way out.
Yes.
I would venture to say, if we went to my home right now,
They'd be all different.
each bathroom would be different. Some in, some out.
There's chaos in your house. Just the chaos. Chaos. I'm telling you, I guarantee you, you die, you go to hell. That's half of the punishment. You never know the toilet paper direction.
That's true.
You might go in there and you're underneath, flipping it, trying to get that little tab to come free. When it's right on top, just a slight, roll of the wrist. There it is. You see it, you pull it. Instead, you flip it, you spin it, it hits the floor. You got to tear off 4 squares because they got all gross, and nobody wants to get, bathroom floor on their caboose. You got to throw that away. So you just wasted 4 squares.
Yep.
And then you pull it off. Then you do the nice, do
the right thing.
I should write a manual on that and other, fold your toilet paper. Don't just wad it into a ball because that's just ugly and messy. Things like that.
Proper usage of toilet paper 101.
So it's been decided, folks.
That's right.
Roll goes out.
Yeah.
Now you just got to convince all those devils in your
midst.
In your midst, yes.
Yes.
Okay, Betsy's got the story this week. The meat and potatoes of the meal.
Yes. Okay, so happened across this. It is everybody's talked about this. And I think I've heard bits and pieces of it, but never really dove into it because it's just like, everybody's talked about it. You know a little bit. Everybody knows a little bit. This story is about a warship.
Oh, warship.
Yes. The USS Eldridge.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular ship is what they call a cannon-class destroyer escort, which, to break it down, were built primarily for anti-submarine warfare. They are used to were used to find, track, deter, damage, or destroy enemy subs. They had, at the time, a mix of what was then the latest technology, both sonar and weapon.
Now, what year are we talking about?
So, the year that it was ordered is 1942.
Mm-hmm.
Launched. So, okay, first of all, this was astonishing. You know what? I can't even...
Now, this is pre-World War II. Now, World War II changed naval warfare.
But yeah, this is... So it's launched 1943. So we're talking right in the beginning of World War II.
So,
It's ordered, completed, and launched about 18 months is all it took.
Yeah, they're actually really quick.
Yeah, I was really surprised to hear that these, these were built that
Throw
fast.
a lot of men at them. That goes back to the pyramid thing, how people are saying that only aliens could have built the pyramids.
But they just these shipyards were full of people.
I mean, look at when Kaiser was building battleships. He was putting battleships out for war. The turnaround, under a year, they're just coughing these ships out for war. So throw enough men at it, it gets done.
So, launched July 25th, 1943, decommissioned June 17th, 1946. They didn't have a really long life.
Mm-hmm.
Sold to Greece January 15th, 1951, and renamed the Leonge. So,
sounds French.
Yeah, it does, huh? So to set this up, during World War II, destroyer escorts were created to protect the Allied convoys.
To protect the fleet.
Yeah.
They would sit on the outside of the fleet. You wanted to protect the aircraft carrier on the inside. That was the warfighter.
Yeah, well, it had supplies and soldiers and things on it that you definitely... The subs, which they actually termed the U-boats, would make these old convoys. So the first problem is the convoys carried the most necessary supplies, and they were often made up of leftover ships.
Mm-hmm.
They were just the slowest, the most vulnerable, easy targets.
Well, okay, when I went to Cuba for the first part, because they didn't have tenting for us, they didn't have our camp set up. We stayed on a Panamanian cruise liner. Okay?
Was it like Caribbean cruise?
Not at all.
You had disco.
Well, I'll tell you the history of the ship. The ship was built in, I want to say around 1915.
Oh.
Okay, and it was built...
Wood?
No, it was a steel ship. But it was built originally as a cargo hauler.
Okay.
World War I breaks out. It gets commissioned as a personnel hauler, right? So this ship then got fitted with a couple of guns, and it would haul soldiers or whoever from the United States, from New York, over to Europe.
Oh, that'd be a long ass ride.
And then after the war, it got sold to Norway. Okay, it was built in the U.S. Then it got sold to Norway. And in Norway, it went back to a cargo hauler. So it was hauling cargo again. But then cargo started getting updated where they hauled cargo in bigger size loads.
Right.
So Norway then converted it to a cruise liner. Okay, so they popped a whole bunch of little rooms in it. It's a cruise liner again. World War II kicks out. It gets commissioned again by the U.S. The U.S. buys it again. Another personnel hauler. It doesn't get used much as a personnel hauler, but it's available because they had much bigger personnel haulers. But the U.S. bought it again. It was a sturdy ship. It was, well maintained. Then World War II ends, and it gets sold back to Norway. Norway then sells it to Argentina. Argentina uses it as military purposes for a while, and then it gets sold to, while Argentina has it, Korean War kicks off, U.S. buys it again,
Good hell.
converts it again, or actually I think Argentina left it as a personnel carrier. It hauls people on the Pacific now to Korea. And then the war ends, U.S. sells it to Panama. Panama makes it into a cruise liner, and it's still a Panamanian cruise liner as of 1995. And so we stayed on it for a while. So that's the history of these ships. They get
bought and sold and bought and sold.
And
repurposed.
changed. Yeah.
We had, at the time, warships to protect our convoys. However, these warships had this enormous turning radius. And they had to stay pretty far behind because of that, leaving these convoys open to U-boats. So they create these destroyer escorts, which are smaller and much more maneuverable.
They're nimble.
So, and they do that because in 1942 alone, more than 1,000 Allied vessels were sunk. Mm-hmm. So this becomes like top priority. Create this. This is where the story really begins. So, the Philadelphia Experiment, as it was coined by a writer, an author actually gave it.
So it wasn't. It was never called the Philadelphia Experiment by the government.
No.
It probably had a code name.
Well, some people say that it was Rainbow, but you do some research, and Rainbow wasn't about cloaking and things. It was about the powers, the access. They did have a Project Rainbow, but that if you look into it, really didn't have anything to do with this experiment. Mm-hmm. So yes, it was theoretically given several different names. But it's about cloaking and invisibility, and it's been accredited to both Einstein and Tesla.
Okay.
Here's how it breaks down. Einstein, to put him into the mix, born 1879 in Germany, lived in Switzerland from 1895 to 1914. In 1896, at the age of 17, so this is right after, maybe a year after he gets to Switzerland, he denounces his German citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Takes him 5 years to acquire Swiss citizenship. So he's 5 years without...
Okay. And this was what year again that he did this?
1896.
1896. So I don't know what that anti-Semitic status was then.
Yeah.
There was always anti-Semitic status, or not even anti-Semitic status. We should just say there were anti-Jews spread throughout Europe forever because the Jewish population kept to themselves. And I'm not trying to make a judgment call, but the Jewish population kept to themselves because they had common values they understood.
Sure.
They understood how valuable it was to keep your common values together. That way they didn't get someone coming in to bad apple the group with a bad value. And that's not saying that everyone else had bad values, but the Jewish people had a good set of values, a strong set of values, education and family. And,
right. So he's 5 years without citizenship and becomes a Swiss citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And while in Switzerland, he actually works for a patent office, and
mm-hmm.
he develops and refines many of his theories. Amongst them, which is going to become super important, is the unified field theory.
Uh-huh.
So the unified field theory, to break it down, is the idea that forces are not transmitted directly between interacting objects, but instead are described as interrupted.
Yeah, that's breaking it down. Let's
by intermediary entities called fields. So there's a field between us that creates the interaction between us, or the light showing me is created by my reflection, or the reflection of the light on my clothing. And if I was wearing anti-reflective clothing, people wouldn't be able to see me.
Okay, so we've got to...
So it's...
as a feeble attempt to break this down further,
yes.
What you're saying is what?
Okay, so this theory is about the way that light reacts with objects, not being that light is reacting necessarily with the object, but with the fields in between the object. Like a rainbow is made by a prism. The prism refracts the light. So this unified field theory is that this particular transmittal of light can be interrupted by whatever's put in between.
So, okay, hold on. Is this theory proven?
Well, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course. So
I'm understanding. Is it?
It's the idea that people before didn't understand that you could blur someone's view of something by refracted light, or by changing the perspective with which the light hit that object.
So, okay. So
we understand it now.
We know light's a wave.
Correct.
So he's talking about something that changes the direction of that wave, or the frequency of that wave, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And he's calling it, he's calling the entity a field, which is basically just anything that interrupts that.
See, I'm still, I understand that sound has to travel through an atmosphere because it's also a wave or a vibration or whatever. And you hear those theories that everything's vibration. All solid, all liquid, all matter's a vibration, the atomic level. My mind got lost at vibration. But anyway, so light... So he's not talking about like you throw a blanket over it, because then you see the blanket.
Correct.
There's something that... Does it just make a blank spot, like a nothing there?
Well, let me get into this. That's where Tesla comes in.
Okay.
So, Einstein goes on vacation 1933 to the United States. He's just like, ooh, gonna go visit the United States. Must have been like a tourist attraction.
1933, how old was he then?
1933.
I want to know what his hair looked like. Was it white, and did he look like a vacuum cleaner was the number one?
He would have been nearing his 60s at this time.
Okay, so his hair was white. His hair was crazy.
Yeah.
He looked like, I dig Einstein.
I do kind of dig him too.
A brilliant man. I love it's not just that he's smart, because he's so smart I don't even understand that he's smart. I just know he's smart. I dig his personality, and he seemed like a very positive, objective guy, that although there are some things that he said that cause you to concern, like when he talked about aliens coming or things like that, but he just seemed so positive. Like he seemed like he kept a youthful exuberance for life and the world through his whole life. He never let anything drag that away from it.
And I think in part it's because he was just so curious. He didn't look at something and go, it does that. He looked at everything in his life and said, why does it do that? What is causing that? Why does it shift the way that it does and not another way? He wanted to explain things. So his curiosity probably kept him really youthful.
I imagine it would.
He'd be a cool guy.
But you kind of have to have some kind of patron to have that curiosity and be able to play with it. Because I've got a lot of curiosity. I just can't play with it because I need a patron.
Yeah. While he's here...
I need an Oprah.
You need an Oprah. Damn it. I don't need an Oprah.
Why not?
I don't know. I'm not super... Okay. Next subject. While here in the United States, Hitler comes to power. And as you talked about his Jewish heritage, he decides, I ain't going back.
I don't blame him.
First of all, because I think Hitler did something that I think that people don't recognize as part of his scheming or the group of people that surrounded his scheme, but he started to collect people that had scientific backgrounds.
Oh, yeah.
And really their families were held captive. They were forced to. Some joined willingly.
Yeah, Mengele was a monster. A monster.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about this is, man, we're getting way off subject. But Mengele thought he was doing good.
Yes.
And he was a monster. But the Japanese, what was it, Unit 721? Oh boy, this is a touchy subject, but kind of the evil things they did turned out to be good if you appreciate modern medicine. But God, they were monsters.
Yeah.
They just flew and released fleas full of bubonic plague on farmers. Peasants that, one, had a miserable life to start with, and then didn't know it, had no recourse, had nothing. Horrible things are done. I don't know, but they all thought they were doing good.
Yeah.
And Mengele's. I mean, if you haven't listened to the last podcast on the left's show about it.
Yeah, he was a horrible person, but I think it's common for people of scientific background to get caught up in the big picture and miss the forest for all, or miss the trees for the forest. They're not individually seeing each and every life they're affecting. They're trying to, as a whole, create something great.
Everything's just too clinical. There's
They separate their emotions from the process.
Oh.
Well, I think Einstein saw that as writing on the wall. Listen, I'm Jewish. He may want me for my brain, but really, they're not going to do much with me afterwards because I'm still Jewish.
Yeah.
And instead,
not to mention it's an ideology and a economic means that can't last. I mean, anyone who took a clear look at that understands that neither of those ideas could have lasted.
Right. They were very
Fascism
temporary.
and anti-anythingism. They just can't last. You'll end up destroying yourself after you've destroyed your target.
Yeah. So he stays here instead and is picked up almost immediately by the Navy. Now, I think at this point he held so many patents, he was so widely well known that it really was a short jump for the Navy to say, okay, you're staying? Great, work for us.
So the Navy nabbed him up?
Yes. Okay. And mostly to work on conventional weapons like torpedoes and such.
Well, of course. I mean, just let's say you're fighting a war. And but let's even go off today's monetary standards. There's a scientist that could go work at a college for $200,000 a year. You could hire him for $220,000 a year, and he gets to wear a patriotic pin, and he gets to have a little more experimental leeway with money coming his way, and all he ends up inventing is a new shape of a fin on a torpedo.
Yeah.
I think that's a win in both directions for the Navy and for the person.
Sure.
So I get it.
Yeah. So I guess people say that him working on, conventional weapons is just a cover-up, but he probably did, legitimately work on conventional weapons.
I'm sure.
So the conspiracy theory surrounding the Philadelphia Experiment is they used Einstein's unified field theory to bend
magical
light.
Blanket wiggle theory.
Yes, same. To bend the light surrounding this ship, to make it invisible. Now, this is where Tesla comes in.
So they were going to put... I understand what the Philadelphia Experiment was. I've looked into it years back, but... So they were going to throw an electrical field around it?
So here's what they did. Tesla was already working for the Navy at this time, Nikola Tesla. He was doing other projects, mostly to do with radar and such. he was able to create these really strong magnetic fields.
Uh-huh.
Him and Einstein, this is the theory,
Uh-huh.
they kind of came together.
They met at a bar.
The
music started playing.
Yes.
Soft and low.
And he said, hey,
They made eye contact.
what's your sign?
Tesla did a coy smile away.
Yes.
Einstein rocked his silver
he waved
mane.
his silver mane in the wind. So here's the theory. They used Einstein's unified field theory
Uh-huh.
to bend the light surrounding the ship, making it invisible due to it being encased in this electromagnetic fog, they call it.
Okay. Now, man, I have a lot of questions.
Yes. So let me just tell you how this all came to light. So we're going to
came to
dark.
band light.
Yes, bend light. Okay, so guy named Carl. We're going to call him Carl.
Carl.
Here's the deal. This never made sense to me.
Oh, I'm at that boat. Welcome aboard.
Yeah. So
I was there a little bit ago, and I've looked into this more on the other side.
I have my opinion.
I have no understanding of.
After reading everything, I have my opinion. I'll share it with you at the end. But Carl, here's his quote. I watched the air all around the ship turn slightly darker than all the other air.
Uh-huh.
I saw after a few minutes kind of like a green hue, and I watched as thereafter the DE-173 became rapidly invisible to the human eye.
Ooh.
So DE-173 is Destroyer Escort 173. So one thing I did learn is...
That DE means Destroyer Escort.
Yes. But when they were...
And now we all know, folks.
When they were sent to war, the DE was removed. And only 173 was left on the boat. I'm not sure why, but it was a distinction that happened. When they were in port, the DE was added as a way of classifying them.
Okay.
When they were actually sent out,
over the DE.
DE's painted over, it just says 173. So, Carl is seeing it prior to it being put into the war effort.
Okay.
He is seeing it in a shipyard somewhere.
Okay.
So let's talk about Carl. Okay. His real name, Carl M. Allen.
Okay.
He goes by Carlos Miguel Allende. So he chooses a Spanish name as his alias.
He shot far from. So he's a white guy.
Yes, born in Wisconsin.
So he could be of Spanish descent, and maybe his family came to Ellis Island and
Perhaps.
changed his name. But
he's born 1925 in Wisconsin. So no, he didn't come through Ellis Island.
But his family could have. And
His family could have,
maybe,
yes.
Maybe done some genealogy and found out, hey, my family comes from Spain, the Allende town, and
Yeah.
so okay, he could be. If he's not, is he just using that as a pseudonym to try to disguise himself a little bit?
Perhaps. So, here's how it all goes
He
down.
didn't shoot far from the mark either way.
Yeah. So this is his quote. I watched the air around the ship turn darker than all the other air. He doesn't come forward with this for years. It's not like Carlos is like, the day after this experiment. Oh my gosh, you will not believe what I saw. Now, he says that the reason he didn't is because everyone who was a part of this was told quite specifically.
Got a gag order on him.
Yes, you don't speak about this. And so he finished his career.
Top Ninja's secret gag order.
He finished his career in the Navy, and then a book comes out. The author is Morris K. Jessup, and the book is called The Case for the UFO.
Okay.
Now, Morris Jessup.
I've heard of Jessup.
Yes. Morris Jessup, wannabe astrologer, wannabe part of NASA, ends up being an author, has like this sordid love-hate relationship with the whole scientific community, does a ton of research, and writes this book, The Case for the UFO, which in and of itself it doesn't read like fiction, it reads like scientific discovery.
Uh-huh.
So he writes this, but in the beginning of the book, he calls upon the public, and this is what incites the whole Philadelphia Experiment. Carl reads this book, and he's calling the public out. The author says that the public needs to move as one and place enough pressure to the powers that be, demanding that they put time, effort, and money into the research of Einstein's unified field theory.
Okay. Now, was he arguing that as his unified field theory is a means to making UFOs fly?
As unified field theory means to helping them develop the necessary means to contact UFO.
Okay, so he's looking at it as a communication means.
Yes.
And the story about the Philadelphia Experiment is they're looking at it as a means to obstruct. The author
Why? Jessup has no idea about the Philadelphia Experiment. He writes this book, The Case for the UFO. It has nothing to do with this experiment.
Uh-huh.
Carl writes his first letter to this author.
Okay.
This is how it all starts. And says, he opens the letter by saying that it is not necessary for them to, put time, effort, and money into it, because Einstein himself has said he retracted his unified field theory, not because of mathematics, because the mathematics worked, but because of humantics. He goes on to say that Dr. Bertrand Russell, who's a British philosopher, logician, and mathematician, also asserted privately that the unified field theory is already complete. But man is not ready for it and will not be ready for it until World War III. So Carl is making these assertions. He writes this letter to the author, Morris Jessup, saying, okay, you need to quit demanding the public look into this, because first of all, Einstein said he didn't stop working on the unified field theory because of mathematics. He'd worked all of that out. He did it because of humantics, meaning it was detrimental to humankind. He goes on to further say that this additionally was also given some credence by Dr. B. Russell in his own private assertion that Dr. Russell also goes on to say that man's not ready for this unified field theory and won't be until World War III.
Okay, so, wow.
He ends the letter to this author saying, the result of this experiment was complete invisibility of a ship, destroyer type, and all of its crew while at sea. Now remember that. The letter goes on to explain what happens to men, at one point saying that the men on board the ship, some of them were mad as hatters afterwards. That's his words. Some committed suicide, and others were just never seen again. Like they just wandered off, never seen again. He ends the letter stating, the experiment that you have called upon the public to do again by continuing their efforts into unified field theory was a complete success. The men were complete failures, meaning the men on the boats. So this letter first shows up to author Morris Jessup. And he kind of tucks it away. It's like, wacko, whatever. He gets another letter. This second letter, again, from Carl M. Allen, going as the alias Carlos Miguel Allende.
Wonder if he goes into bars.
So, it seems to bolster his credibility. It gives details of the ship log, saying, listen, you don't believe me, that's fine. Because at this point, Morris hasn't pulled his book. He's not made any open letters to the public saying, okay, never mind, I don't want to do that. And we believe that this is why Carlos, Juan, Jorge, whatever we're going to call him, sends the second letter. And it says, it gives details of these ship logs. It says basically, like, go check them out. There was an anomaly in behavior in the events in the times following this experiment. It was said that in the ship's logs, there will be noted about a strange brawl at a local port tavern. He goes on to say he hopes that if the author will just do his research, quote unquote, it will make the author choke on his tongue, and instead of asking for this to continue. So he's like, check the ship logs.
After they did the experiment, then he wants them to look into
the ship logs, and he gives dates.
Well, actually, the logs of what the sailors did at port afterwards, kind of the blotter of the captain.
Right. So in looking into this, the ship's logs were so they were 3-part. One was, it's like any other log, I would guess, in any
stardate 2535.
Yeah, and it's like, so it's their notes first, and then those notes are put into an official log, and then during war times, those notes are then cleansed a little, and there's a war log.
A little bit of redaction.
Yeah, so there's a 3-part log, and he says, check it out. Go get the log, read the log for this day, following the day that Carl says this experiment took place.
Okay.
If you look at a Philadelphia newspaper article, which is still available online, the week of October 1943, there is an article. They came out about weekly then because it was such a long process to get to print. Mm-hmm. There was an article that you can still pull up today titled Strange Occurrence Surround Tavern Brawl. Mm-hmm. In this article, it goes on to say that 2 waitresses who were very nervous while being interviewed had recounted that 2 sailors, while waiting for the local law to arrive, there had been a brawl. They had called the local law. So first they had called the Port Authority. Mm-hmm. The Port Authority was on its way. The brawl continued, so they called the local law. It goes on to say that these waitresses being interviewed by the journalist who's writing this blog for the Philadelphia paper, they go on record as saying that 2 sailors standing in front of them disappeared into thin air.
Okay, whoa. So
these 2 waitresses tell this journalist.
These 2 sailors are just standing there.
Waiting for local law.
Waiting for the cops.
Disappear.
And then just pop.
Gone. And here's what it says in the ship log. In the ship log, so not the first version, not the second version, but probably the second version, because at this point it's still the DE-173. Okay. The DE hasn't been removed. So
when it goes into combat, it doesn't have the DE on it.
Correct. And those logs are more like, they don't talk about the day-to-day occurrences. They're like more war logs, like, this knots at this speed, at, this direction, we encountered this. So they're more clean. Mm-hmm. So probably the second version of those logs says, we interviewed a couple of waitresses, or whatever they call them, and it says, them dames are daffy. They said our boys disappeared. In the ship log. Mm. The journalist, but they just don't give them any credence in the ship log. They actually said, them dames are daffy. Them dames are daffy.
So, okay.
The journalist.
So, the Navy also interviewed these waitresses.
Anytime there was a brawl, they had to kind of take notes, and someone would show up. And probably the Port Authority took this, and then,
I'm sure if there was a brawl where it was tied to sailors tied to that ship, their master at arms, their person at sea that's in charge of law enforcement on the boat would go and check it out. I'm sure.
Yes. So the ship log says them dames are daffy. They said our boys disappeared. The journalist says, listen, we interviewed these waitresses, and they said that, they were really nervous, they were really upset, and they said, listen, these sailors disappeared into thin air. We saw it.
Just pop.
Gone. I don't know if it was like a slow fog.
Like a shimmer.
Creeped over. Yeah,
Looked like glitter spinning around.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd be cool to know.
In a glass.
So, second letter, that's what it says. Go check the ship logs. You'll see. Hugh Al Bielik. Because all right, at first I was like, all right, scientist. He claims to have been on the scientific team and goes on record as saying, although the entire team was nervous of the experiment, it went on as planned. Powerful magnetic fields were engaged around, he calls it the Eldridge. A skeleton crew aboard, which was, as he claims, hand-picked, scientists were watching at a safe distance on another ship. So there was another ship in the yard that the scientists were watching from. He says he watched the entire experiment take place. He then goes on to say he was part of the team to first go aboard the ship following this experiment. 5 men were buried in the steel of the ship, dying or dead.
Yeah, like they were half in, half out.
I mean, you can find Al Bielik as Al Bielik on many, 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 many interviews.
Yeah.
Some of them 4 hours long where okay.
See, these are the haunting stories I've heard about it.
Yes.
Like guys that were half melded into the steel.
Yes.
Like
and
only half their bodies, or even just like an arm poking out.
Yeah.
And the guy's in there dead, you know.
And some of them were still alive, just writhing in pain from what he says. So, others, as they counted head, were just missing. He said, we did a head count. Normally these destroyers had 100 or so sailors on them. This, he said, had a skeleton crew. What he remembers is like in the 30s, low 30s, 33 or so. He said, so some were just gone. Some were just gone. Now, Carlos is saying that he was on the nearby ship as a deckhand. Carlos claims that he sees this fog that absolutely swallows this ship in what he thought was just like this optical effect. And it manifests itself slowly, and that it's so, the field of energy around this ship is so large that the ship next to it, Carlos is on, he sticks his hand out and sticks his hand into the field of energy and pulls it back out.
So his hand like disappears behind this.
Yeah,
fog.
and he says that as he's watching, it's like you don't feel anything, but it's like his visual of his hand becomes distorted the further in it goes. From what Al Bielik says, they were testing radar invisibility. They were testing that this particular ship, the DE-173, had been outfitted with big magnetic coils designed by Tesla to create what they wanted to create was radar invisibility, but they had also achieved optical invisibility.
So they were kind of way overpowered.
Yes. Now, this is where the story gets all, what? So that, I get that. I really do. That, I can totally believe that the Navy, understanding the war at hand, wanting to remain invisible to the U-boats and other foreign warships, wanted to create a degaussing. A lot of ships back then were kind of new to degaussing. And maybe Tesla and Einstein at the bar having a beer said, you know what we could do? We could really make this degaussing like super effective. Now, Tesla has gone on record as saying, I didn't want to be a part of degaussing in a large spectrum because I didn't understand what it would do to the humans. Because you can't have an unmanned ship. And the first couple of tests that they did with degaussing, like on record, the making, which is it blocks radar, it kind of scrambles the airwaves and the sound waves. The sailors on board would get violently ill. And so the Navy was like, oh, okay, that's not working because we can't be out to sea, degauss our ships, and everyone be sick and then have to replace all the sailors.
Then they
it's
just gotta follow the vomit floating in the water instead of radar.
Yeah, so I can see that perhaps, like you said, these scientists, they get kind of lost in the quagmire of like making this work.
Yeah.
So I could see the Navy doing a big experiment, and some sailors got like screwed up in the old noggin from it because the magnetic fields were too high. I mean, today, if we, put someone in a CAT scan machine and left them in there for 3 or 4 days, they'd probably be a little messed up.
Cook them a little bit.
So perhaps that happened, and that's where the story started. Now, I think, like many other myths, legends, urban legends, it kind of takes on a life of its own.
Gets exploded a little further.
And people, oh no, we saw people melted in the ship, and oh no, this happened. So Al Bielek says he's a part of the scientific team. Now, again, I don't think the Navy had like a roster of like, these are our scientists working on our most... I think it would be difficult to verify that information. Because I don't think that they just put that out there. I think if they had secret projects being worked on, they were secret.
Yeah, that could be. I mean...
Perhaps they don't. Maybe they do. Al Bielek, he's a whole nother
He does
show.
have a lot of controversy with him.
Because have you watched his... Okay, he starts out like he knows his stuff. Like he starts out sounding really well-adjusted, extremely credible. He gives like this heavy legitimacy, and then about halfway through his interview, it's like, and he changes. He's like, and then I was teleported, and I went to another planet, and I collected dark matter, and I'm really an alien. He like completely blows it. He blows it. So I'm listening intently.
What if he's telling the truth?
Yes. Okay, it's too much for us at this point, clearly, if he is telling the truth. Because he starts out like, yeah, I was a part of the scientific. Listen, we were just trying to do the following. It kind of took on a life of its own. We actually made the ship invisible. Now, that can be done today with kind of the same unified field theory. Because we are making stealth fighters and things that give the appearance to blend into their surroundings.
Well, mostly what stealth fighters do is they use a lot of flat angles.
Correct.
And that way, radar... So if you hit a rounded object with radar, it bounces it back and it spreads it out just because of the curvature. Where they use flat angles and angles that focus so that...
They bend...
That radar shoots back in a straight wave that it hit in. It goes, it has a direct refraction instead of opening up the spectrum. Right. Or this is again a 5th grade level person explaining how radar works. Please correct me, someone smarter. But what they do is they use flat angles, which makes it so that radar bounces back more in a focused beam versus spreading it out, because the radar dish picks up that refraction. It sends out a signal and then it picks up. It's like we could call it like a bat.
Yes.
If a bat is...
It sends out a sound.
Squeaking, and then here's that squeak come back, it paints it a picture.
Correct.
Now,
or
imagine,
like those blind people that used it.
Yeah, imagine if you had something that sent that
in a different
squeak
direction
back to where it didn't pick it up. Like if it squeaked against a wall and that sound went
a different way.
90 degrees away from the direction it came to the wall, the bat wouldn't see it. And that's the same theory with the radar. But they might be using other stuff as well on those aircraft that I have no clue about, because one, that's probably top secret. Like when the Abrams came out and they used reactive armor, the armor was top secret. How the armor was made, what it used. And from what I understand, the armor has an explosive element to it, so when an explosion hits, it blows the explosion back with another explosion protecting the piece of equipment. Again, a 5th grade level education, breaking down what it understands.
So Bielik goes on to kind of say that, it's that the Navy never stopped testing unified field theory.
Now listening to Bielik, he was involved in everything that's ever happened.
Yeah.
That's the hard part with Bielik. First of all, just the travel time with that guy had to have been insane because he says he was part of the Montauk Project. He was a part of Project Rainbow. He was a part of the Philadelphia Pegasus. Pegasus is the big one, and we are going to do a show on Pegasus. Let's not break into that too much now because as far as Pegasus goes, honestly, the most interesting tale out there.
I think that what I find with all of these is there's a little bit of truth behind all of them. It starts somewhere, and then it just kind of takes on this life of its own. And it's like that secret game that you play where you whisper a secret, and then that person hears their secret, and then they whisper it. By the time, like you say, I wear pink socks. By the time it gets back to you, it's like pink salmon float upriver, and I eat them every day. Yeah.
All that could be true. The whole story of the ship and all that could be true. And it could be boiled down to as simple as, here's a crazy thought. What if that morning that crew 33 went on the ship and only one of that 33 is the cook? And that cook is not a good cook. And he pulls down that can of beans, and that can of beans is contaminated. And they eat something that causes meningitis type symptoms or something that makes swelling in the brain. I mean, we can eat contaminants that do that stuff. And it hit all those 33. So it had nothing to do with the electromagnetic. I mean, there's so many other ways that could go, which caused these guys to have, delusions or they suddenly want to become not connected with other people or any of that stuff.
Sure. Bielik finishes a lot of his interviews with the question well, if these sailors disappeared, were killed, what were their families told? And he said that the Navy institutionalized the ones that were completely nutso and basically told the families that the sailors were lost at sea as part of the war efforts.
Could be. That honestly, that could have happened, I guess.
So.
Still sounds like it sounds like when you look at stuff like that, there are too many people involved for big secrets like that to be kept for too long.
Yes. Now, Carl says, listen, I went along with this whole thing until I saw Morris's book. Then I felt like, listen, this project, this experiment that they did, they kept me quiet for this long, but this experiment that they did, it hurt people. So he writes the letter to the author, and then he just disappears into obscurity. Mm-hmm. He disappears. Well, nothing happens. 1956. So this is a while after this.
Mm-hmm.
A copy of this book, The Case for the UFO, arrives at the ONR, which is the Office of Naval Research. Mm-hmm. The copy has annotations that appear to be from three separate contributors. Mr. A, Mr. B, and Jemmy are the names of these. Now, they've gone on to say that these were actually all Carl, but he was trying to make it seem as though he annotated the book, passed it on to another scientist or someone to give it some credence who annotated the book. And there's all of these annotations in
So he just wrote different.
Well, he's giving notes, you can't do this on the case of the UFO because it's already been done here. You can't do this because of this. He's kind of like a cautionary tale. Sends it to the Office of Naval Research. No return address. And scrawled on the back of this envelope, it says Happy Easter. I don't understand that.
Maybe it was sent around Easter.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So,
see that, but that's
one notation reads, U.S. Navy Force Field Experiment, October, produced invisibility of ship and crew, fearsome results so terrifying, halt further research. So he's not trying, Carlos Allende, Carlos Allende, Carl Allen, whoever he is, he doesn't want to be known. He doesn't want people to come and interview him. The Navy tries to find who sends them this. The letters are sent from 3 different addresses in different places. Probably he lived in 3 different addresses. I don't see him being smart enough to go out and mail them from 3 different places. At any rate, he's like, stop. You guys need to stop doing this. He makes all these annotations. He sends it to the Office of Naval Research. This is where the conspiracy theory people believe that this lends some credibility to it, because the Navy gets this and reportedly reads it. I mean, maybe they were bored, nothing to do. Maybe it was like sitting on the coffee table in someone's office. I don't know. But apparently what they do is they call the author. They bring him into the office to see if he sent it. What are all these annotations? What's all of this about? First of all, why? Why do they care? Conspiracy theorists are like, yeah, well, they must have cared because something in there clearly crossed a line.
That's true. If they're talking, if the author is writing about unified field theory, and then someone's talking about an experiment that was done on unified field theory, and the Navy says, how do they know?
Right. So they call him in. The author comes in and is like, hey, I recognize this annotations. I didn't send you the book, but I have these letters from this guy. That's how they know who did it. They kind of compare notes and letters, and they
find
connect the dots.
Carlos through the author having
received these letters from him.
Okay.
Telling him to stop doing this, to stop writing this book, to recall the book, whatever he was trying to get him to do. Now, again, conspiracy theorists are just eating this up, because instead of just being like, oh, okay, crazy guy, you really don't know anything. This guy who wrote these annotations clearly wrote these letters as well. He doesn't know anything. They don't. They request permission to recreate it.
I have a big question. Could you take, and this is a question neither you or I could answer, but well, maybe you could, but would it be possible to train an average guy, an average intellect guy, to not just understand what the unified field theory is, because that's possible, but to be able to understand its application and its changes, because that's, in my mind, as a layman, I see it. I mean, I have a brief understanding of what they're talking about, but to be able to apply it and all that stuff, it blows my mind.
Well, and I think that's where Carlos got me.
If this Carlos was just a deckhand, then would he be able to understand it enough to make annotations? Or did he, after that, see it and then say, I've got to find out what that was
perhaps
that I saw. And then he started studying.
Now, his brother, because I, again, try to find out, like, who's Carl? Who's this Carlos? His brother said he was a total nerd his whole life.
Okay.
Totally dug that kind of stuff. And
he just became a Navy maybe just got drafted into the Navy.
Could have been.
Just got drafted.
Or maybe it was just,
Or he got his draft notice and says, I don't really want to go wear a pair of boots in foreign soil. I'll join the Navy where I can, not have to.
I don't know, but his brother did say that, he was always really kind of into that stuff, like scientific stuff.
So he might be a super smart guy that just got drafted and
could be.
And I'm sure there's lots of people who IQs are off the chart who never pursue anything of academic accolade like that.
Sure.
You know,
Sure. Do it as a hobby instead of a job.
as a hobby,
Just in their pastime.
or they just become a car mechanic,
Yes,
or you know, something else. You know,
Sure.
and I'm sure there are people who are just super brilliant that just, you know, this
Have
is what I
have
am.
no desire to make
No
it a
desire,
job.
maybe no means,
Yeah.
maybe circumstances of life have kept them in a place where they don't have the opportunity to pursue an education to open up those doors, or
Sure.
you know, so I'm sure that could happen.
So
Yeah.
the office of the Navy office that receives this, instead of just like poo-pooing it, setting it aside, they go to a contracted publisher and they request 25 copies with the original text in black, notations in red, and the letters from good old Carl as an appendix to the book. They want 25 copies of this. So they're giving it some gravity. Now that's on file. You can still get those copies.
So they took the book and then said,
They went to their publisher, a contracted publisher. First of all, they get permission from Jessup to recreate this because it is, copyright. Yeah. So he gives them permission, and the 25 copies, the original text, meaning the case of the UFO, the actual text is in black. The notations from Carl, which at this time they still think is from 3 different people, are in red. And then the letters that the author has given to them is like, yeah, this weirdo wrote me these letters too. They're as an appendix.
Okay.
Now, they start a search for Allende.
Uh-huh.
First in the city the book was sent from, and then each of the cities that each letter was sent from, the Navy don't find him. Which, kind of weird too, but I guess back then it's a little different time. They spend several years researching the context of these letters and the book. Subsequent requests for the copies from the ONR just come back saying, sorry, we don't have any available. So people who want to see like this full thing, like UPARS, the UFO Paranormal Research Association from California, in the 90s did a big expose on the Philadelphia Experiment, and they requested copies of ship logs. They requested, and all of those, after some misgivings, they did receive. Now, the only thing they didn't get is these specific, one of these copies of the book.
The book that was made.
Yes. So
how do we know the Navy actually made them?
Well, again, it's UPARS, as part of their investigation, went to the publisher house and got from the publisher house, specific details about the 25 copies being made and being sent to the Navy office. That's all that they would give. Other than, it's property of the Navy, you'll have to go to them to get those copies. But they did confirm that they did make them. Boy, throughout the 60s, many people search for Allende. Everyone seems to be cashing in on Allende, but Allende. These books go out. Jessup, this writer, he's a scientist first, wannabe astronomer. He wanted to legitimize this UFO theory. And he goes out with this book, The Case of the UFO. And at this time, the government is cracked down on giving official scorn to anyone who supports the idea. So they call him in, they get the book.
See, that's where I think the government's done wrong with, okay, if UFOs are real and the government's trying to keep it secret, the government shouldn't do all these crackdowns against it. Because that feeds the fire, that pushes, you don't want to push a thought underground because then it grows.
Yes.
And if UFOs aren't real, the government should, when people request something that's not going to be damaging to national security on the outside, it should be like, yeah, come in, check out our stuff here.
So this it's all picking up because of this crackdown on, the official scorn. The government is scorning anyone who believes in it, is, propagating the information. April 19th, 1959, Jessup calls his friend, Dr. Valentine, and Valentine goes on record to saying that Jessup tells him that he claims to have found something, further evidence regarding the Philadelphia Experiment. He's calling it that because Carl Allen said that it happened in the Philadelphia shipyard. So he coins it that, and that's where this whole thing kind of, it's the Philly experiment.
Uh-huh.
So, April 20th, the very next day, Jessup's car is found near a park, still running, with a hose extended from the exhaust into the car, and Jessup is found. And he dies soon after. He's found breathing, but he dies soon after. The author.
The author?
The author calls a doctor, says, hey, I found more information. The very next day, he's found dead in his car. On his way to meet the doctor. So, again, that is verifiable.
So if it was the government, they
bumped him off.
Yeah. So they gave him more credence.
Yes. They made him a martyr.
And if it's someone who's trying to build credence around that,
perhaps,
then they made it look like... I don't think...
Again,
they made it look like a suicide, whoever did it.
Yes, he wasn't dead when they found him.
And maybe it was a suicide.
Perhaps, but...
Maybe Jessup's wife told him, I'm leaving you. I've had enough. And Jessup did commit suicide. Or...
Could have been that morning. So, it was just a suicide. Chalk it up to a suicide until they print it in the paper. Then Dr. Valentine comes forward and says, whoa. This author called me yesterday and said he found something. And he was coming to see me that day to bring me that evidence. Why is he now dead? Somebody needs to look into this. So that's how that kind of picks up. Well, following his death, people are just humming about this story. Like, what happened in Philadelphia? What happened? Other authors are starting to write books. The Philadelphia Experiment comes out. That's a book. All these other people are just getting tons of money off of this. Everyone except for the whistleblower, Carlos Miguel Allende. Just when you think it's over. Summer of 1969, Carl walks into the headquarters of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, which is in Arizona, with a copy of the Case for the UFO book under his arm and says, this was all a hoax. I made this all up. Tell everyone. I lied. Conspiracy theorists say it's because he wasn't making any money and he was sick of his name being thrown around.
Could be.
Other people say, no, he had a change of heart, wanted to just tell the truth.
Okay.
Neither of those really make sense to me. I don't know why he would do that, but he did.
Wow.
Yes. Then, 5 years later, another book comes out where they interview Allende. And he says, listen, am I going to get paid for this? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, okay, I'll tell you the real story. It happened. I saw it. Sailors got hurt. This is what happened. It happened, from what I understand, one time. They never did it again, at least not that I saw. Al Bielek says, no. We did it many times. We did it over and over and over again, trying to perfect it. With personnel, without personnel, with lower wattage, with more wattage. Now, Bielek seems like he understands the process until he starts collecting dark matter and stuff, and then he loses everybody.
Yeah.
The conspiracy...
Let's not go too deep into Al Bielek yet, because
this
is the easy part of Al Bielek.
Yes.
When you get to Project Pegasus, that's when Al Bielek will, if what he's saying is true, then the only argument you could come to is that lizard people control us. That's it. Yeah. And he never says that, but that's the only thing you could think of.
Right.
Because it is
because he absolutely melts down.
Oh.
He is like full on facing the camera, straight face, and he starts talking some stuff.
Yeah.
So.
And he brings names into it.
So, a couple of questions at the end of this. One, How did Carl know? Because Carl goes on record as saying, yeah, Einstein was working on this.
If-
How did he know?
I would love it if there was a test on the Eldridge. If the Navy compiled that and honestly said, yeah, we did a test.
Yes.
You know, we're not going to tell you what test we did.
I think that they couldn't, though, because here's my theory.
Well,
my
if
theory
they did
is,
perfect ninja ships, they don't want the enemy to know.
sure, that and those ninja ships, in the perfecting of that, probably got some soldiers hurt. And then how do you lay waste to all of that? To the families of the soldiers, to the people who pay you the money, to the board that's going to approve your next experiment. Listen, okay, so we made a couple of soldiers melt into the deck because our magnetic field was so hot. Sorry. Okay, and these guys, they really didn't die at sea.
You put money and you pay the descendants of those sailors or the relatives.
But it stops completely your advancement in that theory.
How does it stop it?
Well, because I'm sure your funding's going to be pulled. You're killing people. It's going to... Now the war, you have to understand that during the war efforts, patriotism was like propaganda. Join the war efforts. Join the war efforts.
Oh,
if the people know that part of the war efforts is this experimentation...
It still is today.
Sure.
You know, part of that...
They still deny it.
You want to know No, it's wide open. You know, part of that kneeling controversy that came out.
Mm-hmm.
And why the head of the NFL was like, we got to stop this kneeling thing. You know why? Because the United States Department of Defense gives the NFL money to be pro-military.
Oh, sure.
I think it's somewhere upwards of $500,000 a year.
But nobody came right out and said, listen, NFL, you need to stop because you're getting a ton of money.
Oh, I'm sure they
to be patriots.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. They didn't have to. You don't have to. Once you have that connection, okay, let's say I wanted to tell you, Betsy, I want you to not wear purple anymore. Right?
Okay.
Okay. Would I have to do it in front of the whole family? Or would I just, you and me, we have a rapport built. Betsy, don't wear purple anymore. Ta-da. Right? And I'm sure the Department of Defense, whoever makes that connection with the head of the NFL and all those
They just
folks,
went and told them.
They just called them and said, don't do it. But then you see the head of the NFL, a couple of owners, all come out and say, no more kneeling, because it's threatening their bottom line. Regardless of what their politics on that is, it's threatening their bottom line.
It's all about the money.
Everything is.
Yeah.
Let's face it. You can try to say you want to be altruistic, but in the end, resources are needed to carry on your life. And if you're going to put effort into something, you want, resource management involved with that.
Yes, and I often use that when people are like, I can't believe that politician, he made all these promises. I'd say, yeah, but let me tell you, once in office, anyone, even me, can be bought.
Oh.
It's just that simple. Yeah. It's really just that simple.
Well, yeah.
So, in the end, here's what I think. Now, Al Bielek, we'll go into him later.
I can't wait till
he gives a different spin on this. He then goes on to say that we didn't just create invisibility, we created teleportation. The ship shows up in different ports for 4 hours and then comes back.
Pops out and
and then
guys behind. They actually made a movie about it.
Yeah, him and another guy stepped off the ship because they were scared and actually ended up in 1983. Yeah, anyway,
time travel.
He completely melts down. But the Philadelphia...
He's telling the truth.
I know.
If Al Bielek's telling the truth...
God bless us all.
If Al Bielek's telling the truth, then David Icke is correct.
Yes.
That's just it.
And I love David Icke. I love David Icke.
I love David Icke.
I love David Icke.
He's a crazy person.
Yes, he's the best. We need to do a show on David Icke.
Yes.
But I think in a nutshell, Carl saw something. Probably not what everybody thinks, because Carl never goes on record as saying, listen, the ship teleported and someone collected dark matter. He was just like, listen, something happened. If there was a green mist that...
I watched one program about it where they postulated that Carl, after getting out of the Navy, was not doing too well financially, and this was a grab for him to try to have some profit from it. But then I watched other shows that say Carl was a do-gooder that saw this evil thing and what it did and wanted to stop it. And then you watch other shows that say that Carlos Allende and Carl Allen weren't the same person.
Yeah.
You see all these.
Yeah, that's why I think that behind every lie is a shred of truth.
What's the foundation?
Yes, or a shred of perception. And perception is truth. As far as anyone's concerned, the perception is the truth.
The person perceiving it.
Yes, that's the truth. So someone's truth isn't always everyone's truth. Now, where Al Bielek is concerned, I don't know if this feller believes all the stuff he talks, and if he does. Now, memory. In doing this show, or researching this, I did some deep dive into how does memory work, because how can you remember all this crap? Because he tells the story basically the same every time. Mm-hmm. So, if we're talking okay, maybe it's really well rehearsed, but the problem is he's being interviewed by different people who are trying to catch him by asking him different things, and he just sticks to the narrative. So, in researching the show, I was like, well, I need to understand why memory. If this is his memory, how did it get to be that? The way memory works is really kind of a cool show all on its own.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because we remember it the last time we remembered it. Mm-hmm. Not the first time it happened, but the last time we thought about it becomes the new memory of it. Mm-hmm. So if I remember a red truck, and then someone says, oh, yeah, but it had a black stripe. And then I'm like, oh, maybe it did have a black stripe. Suddenly, my memory of the red truck without the black stripe is replaced with the memory of the truck with the red stripe, or the black stripe. So our memory doesn't necessarily build, but it houses the last recollection of that memory as perceptive truth. So perhaps Al Bielek has just been adding on. I mean, who is this guy? Who are you, Al Bielek? You're a freak.
Yeah, he's
so that his memory truly draws out all this weird stuff like teleportation, time travel. He landed in the 80s and met the doctor that was above the Montauk Project who sent him back. I mean, it's crazy talk.
Yeah, he goes into the Montauk Project is another one. And with him, everything ties together.
It's all connected.
And the reason I have such a hard time with him, is he's at the center of everything.
All of it. Yes.
He's at the center of everything. If there's a conspiracy test going on, he's at the center of it. Montauk Project, Project Pegasus, Philadelphia Experiment. He's at the center of all this. So how would that work?
He goes on to say that he's only been Al Bielek for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he's going to be an upcoming time travel show. I don't want to focus on him too much. The Philadelphia Experiment's interesting, and I'm sure that there were multiple tests done on multiple ships. I'm sure they had multiple tests. Anybody who had a theory that could be applicable to war fighting back then, I'm sure they at least gave them some, all right, we're going to try this out, throw some money at it, and see what they could do. I'm sure they did.
Sure.
The Navy, the Army. I
mean, we were losing so many ships. The U-boats were just decimating us. So I'm sure that they were throwing resources, people, money at trying to protect, our wherewithal, our ability to even be in the war.
Yeah, that's
So I believe there's a shred Perhaps a shred, a tiny little
A
shred.
shred in the fact that there were certainly tests done to make ships, to where radar couldn't pick them up. And I know they tried paints. That we know. We know they tried different paint patterns and different materials, painting with different materials to do that.
And we still use degaussing today.
Yeah.
I mean, our naval ships still have degaussing efforts. Now, of course, they're different, but there's an origin to all things that I'm sure had kind of its rocky
So you think
beginnings.
maybe when they first tried it, they built it just a little too big?
Well, I think that...
A little too strong, a little too...
I think that a couple of things came into play. The materials that the ships were built out of, because according to everyone, the people that were below deck, fine. The people that were above deck, in the midst of it, were the ones that, melted into the ship. Now, I don't know if anybody melted into the ship, but I'm sure that there were people hurt. And it's like any other great tragedy. They're like, an ambulance pulled up.
It's the beans.
The reptilians.
The beans. The beans.
A can of beans, not beans.
The engineers are on a different chow schedule than the people up on deck. And so the engineers were down there, greasing stuff and doing their stuff. The guys above deck ate the beans. The
bad beans, people.
Bad stuff happens. Ooh, it's the beans. Gave them extra gas. There was a lot of...
The green smoke was
the green
gas.
mist.
Yes.
And it was so bad and so smelly that the nauseous fumes of that methane that everyone breathed, of their own methane and their birth mate's methane, all of that. And it did brain damage.
Permanent.
But the guys down below deck, they were
fine.
breathing in were diesel.
Yeah. They were fine.
Yeah, so, okay, we've solved it.
There it is. It's the beans.
All right, it's the beans.
Beans, people.
Yep.
Check your dates.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for listening very much.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
If you guys have any notes or anything else on this, please reach out to us. Again, we just do the lightest studying touch.
And let's be honest. I really, I'm listening to these, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is interesting. So I make note of it, and then when he's like dark matter, I kind of do other things. Like I do dishes and other things around the house. So you're getting kind of like what's interesting to me.
This is on our intellectual levels. This is the best you can expect of us.
This is it.
But these are shows that interest us. We're putting out right now until we start getting a lot of contact from the people listening saying, hey, I'd like you to look at this, or this is interesting, or even if you want us to tell what you've looked into, you can pretty much just expect our novice story research to show through. But we do aim to please. And look out next week. Next week, I want to talk the Wendigo.
The Wendigo.
Yes.
I'm still trying to figure out the Anunnaki, the whole Amway period from last week.
The Anunnaki.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you been looking into that a little more?
Well, yeah, because now I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it is in my DNA.
Maybe the aliens made us.
And then we saw that special report this week of that guy who had his nipples removed so he could be more agender. What? It's happening.
No, that's where we go back to
the grace.
Mommy and Daddy hugged you way too much or not enough, and everybody got a trophy, and nobody had to.
we digress.
That's I don't want to talk bad about those people because they are people, and they have
he jokes on it.
They have feelings and emotions, and the one thing that I have to keep in mind whenever I see a story about someone who feels like they're a victim is that they honestly feel like they're a victim.
Yeah.
And
perception.
Yes, but
perception.
The problem is that someone's taught them that. Someone has taught them that you don't have to try to earn anything in life. You have to point at someone else and say, the reason I'm not automatically successful is because of them. Not because I maybe need to put some more effort into this. Let's say I want to play hockey, pro hockey.
You don't like your teeth.
Instead of me getting really good at skating and really good at making the puck into the net and all of that stuff, I just go point at all the other pro hockey players and say, you guys are at fault. I should be up here and not you guys. Because I wasn't born in Canada.
Any minority.
I wasn't born in Canada. My last name doesn't end in ski. It's your guys' fault. That's not going to make a hockey better. That's not going to make them suddenly say, oh, you're right, I shouldn't, because those guys earned where they're at. For me, my 5th grade education, looking at a premier scientist of the day saying, I should be there because I didn't have the same opportunity as you. That's not a realistic way to look at stuff. And they're being taught that. They're being taught to judge someone on immutable characteristics before that person even speaks. First of all, that's prejudice. I don't care which direction you judge in or what you judge. That's horrible to think that way because, if you're going to go around the world judging people on how they look prior to they speak, you're going to miss out on maybe some substance. But anyways, we're off on a tangent and I don't want to be that kind of show. We're supposed to talk fun, crazy stuff. But anyways, next week, the Wendigo. What is it?
Yes.
What does it do? Where does it come from?
It sounds like almost a Winnebago, but not quite.
The Winnebago. But yes, the Wendigo is an interesting story. I love the Wendigo. I love the theory behind it. And there are actually stories of historic Wendigos.
What?
It's kind of a real thing, kind of not. I think part of it is a real thing, and it finishes out as not.
That's what happens. That's what I'm telling you. Shred of truth. Everyone adds to it. It's the secret game. We're playing a large, century-long game of Pass the Secret. And everyone adds to the story.
Telephone game.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for joining us. And
Stay weird.
Yeah.
Stay weird.
Sorry we didn't get a midweek mischief out. Our person dropped out on us, but we'll make up for it
this week.
We'll do 2 of them.
Oh, what?
Yep.
All right. 2
We're
this week.
We're gonna do it. We gotta come true for them. Thank you very much.
Have a great week.